Have you ever stood in a place where time felt wrong? Where the air presses too tightly against your skin, and the silence carries more weight than noise ever could? That's where Marion Thorne found herself in June of 1910, standing before the scorched remains of a school long erased from official history. Eldon Hill Academy, once a prestigious institution tucked high in the Colorado wilderness, now lay collapsed under decades of snow, moss, and rumor. What remained was a blackened husk, skeletal beams reaching skyward like a cathedral of rot. Time, it seemed, had been merciless here. Marion adjusted the leather strap of her satchel and stepped under the arched stone gate. The old iron bell tower loomed above, leaning slightly to the west, casting a broken shadow on the cracked foundation. Scorched into the stone beneath the arch were 5 words, barely visible through the soot. Do not ring the bell. She wasn't here by accident. Marion was an archivist by profession, but a hunter by instinct of truth, of buried crimes, of stories no one wanted told. She had fought for months to access the sealed state files. They arrived in a wooden crate with a wax seal and a single, stamped page. Confidential, Educational Reform. 1891 Incidents. The first page in the box didn't mention students by name. Instead, it offered phrases that defied logic. Subject displayed physical characteristics consistent with stage 5 geriatric degeneration, despite documented age of 12. Estimated biological acceleration, 60 years within a 10-hour window. The file was dated October 11, 1891. The bell above her gave a soft creak as the wind shifted. No one had touched it. That night in 1891 began like any other. The air had grown cold early that year, and snow was already threatening the higher ridges. At Eldon Hill, the dormitories were quiet, the lights low, and the students tucked beneath heavy wool blankets. But at 9:03 p.m., a single sound shattered the stillness. One ring from the tower, sharp and hollow. Not 2, not 3. Just 1. Inside the main building, the matron, Agatha Harrow, froze mid-step. She turned toward the hallway, lips tightening. No one is allowed in the tower after dusk, she whispered. But someone had gone up. The night watchman, Mr. Amos, reached the top first. He would never forget what he found slumped against the belfry wall. At first glance, it appeared to be an old man, skeletal and draped in loose fabric. But the fabric was a school uniform, and pinned to the lapel was a brass badge. Eldon Hill Academy, class of 1895, Isaac Wren, 12 years old. That morning the figure's face was deeply sunken, cheeks collapsed, white hair clinging to spotted scalp. His eyes were milky with cataracts. The only part of him untouched by decay was his mouth, still slightly open in what might have been a final gasp, or maybe just confusion. He had died curled up like a child, but one who had lived far too long. The physician on staff, Dr. Fenwick, examined the body in silence. He found no signs of disease, no trauma. Every organ had aged naturally, just at impossible speed. There was no explanation, not one he could write down. Anyway, in a quiet basement meeting the next morning, the school's leaders sat in panic. Harrow, Fenwick, Father Mallory, and a silent observer from a government department that Marion would never find a name for. You're certain it was the bell? Mallory asked, voice hollow. The timing matches exactly, Fenwick replied. Resonance exposure was brief, but the reaction was immediate. You said it was safe. You said it wouldn't harm them. Fenwick placed a worn diagram on the table. It showed the bell drawn from multiple angles, surrounded by a ring of ancient-looking symbols. I said the sequence was important, he snapped. The bell wasn't supposed to ring once. It was built to ring in triads. The child must have triggered it on his own. Harrow's voice shook. We have to report this. No, the man from the department said. There will be no report. The family is deceased. The records will be sealed. This did not happen, and just like that, Isaac Wren ceased to exist on paper. Marian discovered his name in only one place besides the tower plaque, inside a cloth-wrapped notebook, buried beneath the tower's floorboards. She found it on her second day exploring the ruins, behind a loose wooden plank where the floor curved toward the north wall. The first page was jagged with childish handwriting. "My name is Isaac Wren, if you're reading this." They lied. The bell does something to us. We don't grow up. We get pulled forward, but our minds stay the same. I'm scared. Please, don't let them ring it again. Marian closed the book, hands trembling. Outside, a wind passed through the open stonework. The old bell overhead swayed slightly, metal groaning. It didn't ring, but it moved. A soundless vibration seemed to echo in her skull, like memory returning before it was ever lived. She stepped back from the journal, heart beating too fast. She wasn't just reading a lost story. She was inside it, and something was still listening. The second night Marian spent at Eldon Hill was colder than the first. The wind clawed through the upper passes like it knew something had returned. Her camp was set up just beyond the eastern wall of the ruins, near what remained of the stables, now nothing more than a skeletal frame of timber and rot. She couldn't sleep, not after what she read. Isaac Wren's notebook wasn't just a journal, it was a countdown, each entry more erratic than the last, as if his thoughts unraveled while his body decayed. Some pages were missing, torn out violently. Others were soaked in what might have been ink or something darker. But the most chilling entry came 4 pages in. I saw her again, the girl in the mirror. She doesn't age. She's waiting for the rest of us to catch up. Her mouth doesn't move, but she whispers. She told me the bell isn't broken. It's hungry. Marian didn't know whether she believed in ghosts, but the girl Isaac described wasn't just a figment. She showed up again in another document, in the state file. A disciplinary log, dated 2 weeks before Isaac's death. Student Eloise Marrow, age 11. Offense: encouraging peers to enter restricted areas, claiming to have knowledge of who rings the bell next. Repeated drawings of an eyeless figure with silver teeth. Staff advised silence. There was no record of Eloise Moreau after that date, not in census files, not in death certificates, not in missing children registries. It was as if she had been erased. Marian sat with the journal under the low canvas lamp. She turned each page, like it might crumble, whispering the words under her breath. October 6th, 1891. They took Eloise out of the dorms, said she was sick, but I saw her in the attic windows that night. Her face looked older. I think the bell rang again. Nobody admits it. I heard Matron Harrow arguing with the priest. She said they started something they don't understand, that we're not the first. October 8th, there's a new room in the west wing. The doors weren't there before. It's cold on that side. Now, nobody goes there, not even the staff. Eloise said, if you stand outside it long enough, the wood breathes. I don't want to go, but I think I have to. I think the bell is inside it then. On the final legible, paged 2 words, "It opened." Marian felt her pulse behind her eyes. She closed the notebook and stood. The air around her had shifted. The shadows from the lantern no longer matched the direction of the light. She turned. There, beyond the canvas flap, something moved near the tower. Just a flicker, like a child walking with the gait of someone much older, bent, shuffling. She grabbed the lantern and stepped out into the dark. The moon had vanished behind a wall of clouds. The silence was dense, so dense it felt like sound was being held at bay by something unseen. Marian followed the narrow stone path to the west side of the ruins. There was no door, but there had been one once. She could see the faint imprint of where it stood, cleaner stone in the shape of an archway, as if time had skipped this one outline. The bricks around it were older, wrong, and beneath her boots, the ground seemed subtly hollow. She knelt and brushed the earth aside. More stone. No, not stone metal. A ring, a handle, fused into the earth, rusted shut. A trap door. She hesitated. Every instinct screamed to leave it untouched, but she couldn't. This was what she had come for, not just to uncover stories, but to understand what had happened beneath them. She pulled. The metal groaned, then gave. Earth crumbled inward as the door cracked open, revealing a black chute of airless cold. The scent hit her like a slap. Mildew, copper, and something sweeter, spoilage masked in perfume. Like fruit left too long in a sealed box, she held her lantern upstairs, spiraling, narrow, ancient dot. The deeper she descended, the more the air seemed to thicken. The walls were lined in stone at first, but as she continued downward, they became something else, smoother, pale, porous, not stone, bone, skulls, layered in mortar, facing outward, some small enough to be infants, others fractured. A cathedral of silent witnesses. And there, at the base of the stairwell, stood a door. No knob, just a depression in the center. An imprint of a hand, a child's hand. She reached toward it, and as her fingers met the hollow, a vibration passed up her arm like striking a deep metal chord. The walls began to hum. Her breath caught in her chest, then the door opened inward. Revealing a narrow chamber lit by no visible source. And at the far end of the chamber, suspended in the air, was the bell. Not rusted like the one above. This one gleamed, untouched by time. No dust, no corrosion. Polished black metal etched with symbols that swirled and shifted when not directly observed. Around its base, coils of wire and bone formed a nest, pulsing faintly with red light. Under the bell sat a chair, and in the chair a girl, back turned, head tilted, hair gray-white and unmoving. Her dress, once a school uniform, was tattered and covered in frost. She didn't breathe, didn't move. Then, slowly, her head began to turn, not by muscle, as if guided by strings. Marian stepped backward, bumping into the doorframe. The girl faced her fully now, eyes gone, just pits of polished black. But her mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Do you want to know what time it is?" she asked, but her lips never moved. Marian didn't answer. Her mouth was dry, and her fingers gripped the lantern's base until the metal bit into her palm. The girl in the chair, Eloise, it had to be Eloise, sat perfectly still, as if time had frozen around her. Only her voice moved, whispering without lips. "Do you want to know what time it is?" Marian took a step back. The air pressed against her like water. She could feel her heartbeat slow, unnaturally, like something was regulating her body from outside. The bell above Eloise gave a low, metallic thrum, not loud, not ringing, more like the resonance of something impossibly deep, too old to sound like any bell should. It was the sound of a promise made and broken 1,000 times. Eloise blinked. Her eyes returned, or rather, something in the sockets pulsed once, like jelly catching the light. Her head tilted. "They wanted to stop the clock," she said, "but they wound it backward." The bell pulsed again. Marian turned to run, but the doorway was gone, not just shut, gone. Solid wall now, smooth and without seam. The spiral stairwell had disappeared, and in its place, only the circular bone-lined chamber remained. The light inside was still sourceless, coming from everywhere, and nowhere. The walls glistened faintly. "Sit," Eloise said, though again, the sound didn't come from her mouth. "I don't want to." "You will." They all did. Marian's voice cracked. "Who are you?" The girl didn't answer at first. She lifted a hand. Her fingers moved slowly, like she was miming the turning of invisible pages. "You already know me," she said. "You read him, Isaac. He didn't lie. Not once. He just got old too fast to tell the end." There were scratching sounds now, soft like pencil on paper, but Marian wasn't writing. She looked down. The lantern was gone. In her hands was a book, the same notebook Isaac Wren had written in, except it was blank. Now each page, new, crisp. But she hadn't brought it down here. She'd left it in her tent. "You're writing it now?" said Eloise. "We need a witness." Every time the bell rings, someone forgets. Someone else has to remember. A low vibration crawled up Marian's legs. The floor was trembling gently, but rhythmically, like the pulse of something alive beneath the bones. "Why this place?" she asked, barely able to get the words out. "Why the school?" "Because children listen. Adults pretend, priests lie, but children, they're afraid of the dark for good reason." Marian's knees buckled. The air had become thick again, but this time it wasn't just pressured, was memory. Her body ached, joints stiffening, skin tightening like parchment. Her bones felt loose inside her. "I feel older," Eloise finished. "It's starting." "You touched the door. That was the price." No, I didn't ring the bell. You don't have to. The bell rings you." Then Eloise stood. The movement was slow, brittle, like the sound of dry branches snapping. Her legs creaked. She turned toward the bell, raised one hand. "No!" Marian tried to scream, but her voice cracked in her throat. "Please don't." Eloise paused, then smiled again, wider this time. "Not yet," she whispered. And everything stopped. The light vanished. The weight lifted. Marian gasped, like surfacing from a nightmare. She was kneeling in dirt. Outside the ruins of Eldon Hill lay before her, just as they had that morning. The tower, the stones, the chill mountain wind, the trapped organ. Her lantern sat quietly beside her, its flame still flickering, but the notebook was in her hands, the new one, the one that had been blank. She opened it. There were 3 fresh pages, written in her handwriting. She hadn't written them. October 12th, 2023. I saw her again, Eloise. She hasn't changed. But I have. I feel slower now. My hands don't obey as quickly. My face looks different. There's gray in my hair. I'm only 34. I was 34. I think I left something behind. I think it's still down there, waiting. The wind rose sharply, and somewhere, in the woods behind her, a sound echoed like the distant peal of a bell, not metallic, not clear, just a hum, a suggestion of sound inside the bones. Marian turned slowly at the edge of the tree line. Someone stood, a child, wearing the old school uniform, barefoot, watching. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her mouth curled into a smile, and in that instant, Marian remembered the final line from the state's inspection report, the one she'd skipped over before. The bell was never meant to be rung more than once per century, and it has rung 4 times in 13 months. I didn't go back to the ruins that night. I didn't even make it to the car. I walked until my legs gave out, and I slept in a ditch by the highway, wrapped in my coat, clutching that cursed notebook like it was oxygen. My dreams were filled with flickering lamplight, warped bells, and that girl Eloise, with her cracked smile and eyes like frozen honey. When I woke up, I'd aged. It wasn't subtle this time. My knuckles were swollen, like an old woman's. My back stiffened when I tried to stand, and I could feel my molars aching like they were sinking back into my skull. I stumbled to a gas station bathroom and looked at myself under flickering fluorescent lights. Crow's feet, creased lips, gray at my temples, my face mind still but no longer 30-4.40, maybe 45. I stood there, shaking, while the faucet dripped a slow rhythm like a heartbeat. The mirror felt like glass pulled tight over some truth I didn't want to know. I was changing, being rewritten, and it had started the moment I touched that brass ring on the trapdoor. I drove home that morning, barely able to focus. Every half hour, I'd glance at the passenger seat, expecting to find Eloise sitting there, calm and still, watching. But it was only the notebook. I'd tried throwing it in the back. I even stopped once to toss it into a trash bin behind a diner off Route 9. It was back in my seat when I returned to the car. 3 days passed. Each day, I aged a little more. I could feel it in my knees when I climbed stairs. I saw it in the way strangers looked at me. The bags under my eyes deepened, and the veins in my hands bulged as if my skin was thinning. I stopped going outside. I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? Hi, I visited a haunted school in the mountains, and now I'm losing years of my life every time a ghost smiles at me. No one would believe it, but I wasn't the only one. That's what I realized the morning I opened the notebook and found new pages I hadn't written. They were signed M. Carter, 1979, and below the name, this sentence: the bell doesn't stop ringing when you leave. It rings inside you. You carry it, and one day, it answers back. I flipped to the back. More entries, from different decades, different handwriting, different people, all telling the same story. They'd seen Eloise. They'd heard the bell. They'd aged, some slowly, some overnight. Some had written their last thoughts before their hands turned skeletal and their skins split like paper, and they'd all ended up with this notebook. It was passed on. Somehow I didn't know how many of us there were, but we were all trapped in the same silent toll, and the bell never forgot. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, though it was there, heavy as ever, but because of what I'd seen in the notebook's final entry, a page with my name on it, already written, Marion Hale, 2023, final entry. She's not alone anymore. There was no date, no ink, just faint indentation in the paper like it had been written with a dry pen. I stared at it for an hour. Then I noticed something beneath the paper, buried into the back cover, a flap I hadn't seen before. Inside was a photograph, sepia-toned, torn on one edge. It showed a group of children in school uniforms standing outside Eldon Hill boarding school, and there on the far right was Eloise smiling, pale, and beside her arm in arm was someone who looked exactly like me. Younger, freckled, laughing. My heart froze. The photo was dated 1892. I don't know how it's possible. I don't remember ever seeing that photo before, and yet, there I was, wearing a dress I'd never owned, hair tied in a style from another century, standing beside a girl who hadn't aged in 131 years. I turned the photo over. 3 words were scrawled on the back, in Isaac Wren's handwriting: "It chooses kin." There was a knock at my door, sharp, precise. 3 taps. I didn't move. I held the photo and stared at the door, barely breathing. Another knock, then silence. I crept toward the PEEPHOL. No one, nothing, only the sound of the wind. Except there was something else. Too. A soft hum, barely audible, low and constant, like a bell just beyond hearing, waiting to ring again. The next morning, my voicemail had a single message. There was no caller ID, just the number 000OOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO It's to add a bet L you can L if L O it you L O ten M O pressed play. A child's voice came through soft, dry, like dead leaves being crumpled. Come back. That's all it said. I threw the phone across the room, and it cracked against the wall. But even as I stood there trembling, I knew I would go back. There was no choice. The notebook had never really left me. The photo burned in my desk drawer. The bell was inside me now. Isaac Wren had said so. And if I didn't return to Eldon Hill, it would keep ringing louder until I couldn't think, so I drove. back up those cursed winding roads, past the decayed fence, and into the mouth of the mountains. When I reached the school, everything looked sharper. The building still stood in ruin, but the decay had somehow reversed in small, eerie ways. Shattered windows looked partially mended, the ivy had receded from the walls, and the bell tower, once just a skeletal remnant, now stood taller, whole. And then I saw her. Eloise. Standing at the top of the front steps, her face unchanged, that same timeless gaze, but now she looked disappointed. "You took too long," she said. Her voice was windless. I didn't move. I barely breathed. "What are you?" I whispered. She tilted her head. "Not what? Who?" She turned and walked inside. I followed. The interior was colder than I remembered, but not ruined. Not anymore. The walls were whole, the floors unbroken. Paintings lined the hallway, oil portraits of students and teachers. I passed one labeled Miss Adeline Feather, choir director 1892-1891. The face in the portrait was subtly wrong. The eyes didn't quite look painted. They shimmered faintly in the lamplight. Down the hall, I heard voices, children, laughing, singing. But the building was supposed to be empty. I turned a corner, and the hallway stretched longer than it should, have dozens of doors, all closed tight, all humming quietly. It was like the school had regrown itself from my memories and the nightmares of others who had wandered in over the years. Eloise was waiting at the end. She pointed to a door with a brass knob, shaped like an open eye. "This one's yours," she said. "I don't want to go in." "You already have." The moment my fingers touched the knob, I remembered something. Something impossible. A flash of white lace. A room filled with mirrors. A song sung backward in a girl's voice. I saw myself much younger playing violin in a darkened music room, while a teacher in a black veil stood behind me. Tapping the tempo with her finger on my shoulder blade, I yanked my hand away. "What is this place?" I asked. My voice cracked. "School," Eloise said, simply. "For what?" She smiled, that same cracked smile. "To learn how to stay." The hallway flickered, like candlelight behind thin skin. I stepped away from the door, heart pounding. "I want to leave." "You will. When you finish your lessons." "I never enrolled." "You did," she said. "In 1891, my legs gave out. I sat hard on the floor, breathing fast, cold sweat slicking my back. "I'm not from 1891. Don't be so sure," she whispered. Something creaked behind the door, then the doorknob turned, and from inside, I heard a voice call out, quiet, raspy, and unmistakably mine. "Please, let me out." I did not open the door. I stood up slowly, legs trembling, and stepped back. My breath had fogged the air, even though the hallway wasn't cold. Behind the door, the voice had gone quiet, but I could still feel me on the other side, waiting. Eloise watched me with the same unreadable expression. "I'm not opening that," I said. She didn't argue. Instead, she pointed down the hallway to another door that hadn't been there before. This one was round, made of dark wood. No knob, just a small brass slot like an old confessional. "You'll want to see what they did in there," she said. I didn't want to, but I walked toward it anyway. The moment I reached the door, it opened on its own, slow and silent. What lay beyond was not a classroom. It was a theater. Rows of antique velvet chairs, a small stage lit by gaslight, and on it an exhibit, not moving, not alive. A boy, thin, draped in gray linen, standing perfectly still beneath a glass dome, like a display in a museum. His skin was papery and pale, his eyes open, but empty. His hands were curled slightly at his sides like he had been mid-sentence, mid-thought, and someone had paused him. I recognized him instantly. It was the same boy from the tower, Isaac Wren, but this wasn't 1891. This was now, or some twisted version of now. I walked down the aisle slowly, past the ghostly seats. I heard whispers behind me, murmurs like a forgotten audience leaning in. The plaque at the front read, Isaac W.R.E.N. 14 perfected. March 3rd, 1891. Do not tap the glass. I stared at him. His chest wasn't rising, but the glass had condensation. He was still breathing. I turned, sharply, toward Eloise, but she was no longer by the door. She stood on the stage beside the dome now. Eyes solemn. This was the first one, she said. He was the trial run. The prototype. I shook my head. Of what? She stepped closer to the dome and touched it. The teacher said time could be controlled. If you could distill it in the body, hold it there, it could be stretched, reused, recycled. That's not science, I whispered. No, it was faith, she replied. Twisted into science. What happened to him? She looked at me. He aged all at once, 4 decades, in 4 hours, but only in his bones. I looked back at Isaac. There was a crack running up the side of the glass now. I took a step back. He can still hear? I asked. She nodded. Some of them always hear. And what about the others? Eloise's face grew distant. There in the west wing. I turned slowly. The right side of the stage had a hallway I hadn't noticed before. It pulsed with reddish light. I could hear something wet, echoing, shuffling, dragging. I didn't want to see the west wing, but some part of me already knew I would. Before I could move, a second plaque caught my eye beside the stage exit. Harper, 13 dismissed. March 10th, 1891. Memory, not fully erased. I turned, back to face her. But she was gone. Only her reflection remained, hovering in the dome's curve, faint and fading. Then, behind the glass, Isaac blinked, once, slowly, deliberately. Then, he mouthed something I couldn't hear. I leaned closer. Get out. But the door was already closed behind me, and the lights were starting to dim. The theater plunged into darkness, leaving only a soft red glow bleeding from the west wing corridor. My feet moved before my thoughts caught up. I pushed through the side curtain and entered the hallway, brushing against dusty velvet and brittle lace. The air grew thick with something iron-sweet and moldy, and the further I went, the more the building seemed to shift behind me, narrowing, folding in like paper curling into flame. The corridor twisted. Gas lamps sputtered along the walls, each flame flickering a heartbeat too late, like they were mimicking light, not producing it. Paintings hung every few feet, not of saints or scholars, but of students, dozens of them, each one hunched in strange positions, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Their names were engraved beneath in worn brass, most of them scratched out. One plaque was missing entirely, leaving behind just 4 rusted nails and an imprint in the wallpaper shaped like a face. At the far end, a door was ajar. A low humming leaked out, mechanical, metallic. It rose and fell like a machine straining under its own weight. I entered. The room was not a classroom. It was a lab or something trying to be one. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with stoppered vials, handwritten ledgers, and medical instruments that looked too cruel to be real. In the center of the room, a metal chair was bolted to the floor. Restraints dangled from the armrests, one of them broken. Beneath it, scratches gouged into the wood, a pattern that repeated over and over again. I counted them. 17 rows, each with 7 marks. Eloise's words echoed, some of them always here. To the left of the chair was a tray. Laid neatly across it were fragments of fingernails, tiny, child-sized, yellowed with age. Beside the tray sat a phonograph. Its cylinder spun slowly, whispering a warped recording into the room. Patient 6, time dilation, not fully successful. Subject exhibiting signs of dual consciousness. Possible split, then static, then a voice. Different, not a doctor, a child. I don't want to go back in. Silence. I don't want to go back in. A sharp clicking needle lifted and the recording stopped. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I turned. Nothing, but something had shifted behind me. The chair was no longer empty. A figure sat in it now, thin still, wearing a uniform, a boy's uniform. I took a step forward. He was older than a boy, but not quite a man. Skin like wax, lips pale, eyes staring forward without blinking. But the strangest thing, he looked exactly like one of the boys in the hallway, painting-eyed. Just passed. I backed away, heart pounding. He blinked, then said, in a slow, sandpaper voice, "Don't let them ring the bell again." I froze. What bell? But he didn't answer, because the bell rang clear, deep, echoing through the bones of the building. Once, twice, 3 times, and with it, something stirred in the floorboards beneath me. Not rats, not pipes, footsteps, many, running. The hallway outside darkened, and the paintings began to shift, mouths curling upward, eyes narrowing. Something was coming, something that had heard the bell. The boy in the chair looked straight at me, mouth trembling. They're awake now. Then everything went silent, except for the faintest sound behind the walls. Children laughing, but not like children should, like something pretending to be them. I bolted out of the lab, the door nearly tearing from its hinges as I slammed it behind me. But the hallway was no longer the one I entered from. It had changed, widened, lengthened. The lamps were gone, replaced by flickering electric bulbs that shouldn't exist in 1891. The air was colder too, but not from any weather. It was as though the space itself had been drained of warmth. Like time had stopped breathing. I ran, following the distant echo of footsteps. The bell had stopped ringing, but its sound lingered in my skull, vibrating in my bones. I passed the portraits again knowingly. Now, the children's faces had aged, wrinkled, hollow. Some had turned away in their frames. One had crumbled into dust inside the canvas, leaving only a stretched mouth, frozen in a silent scream. I found the staircase. Halfway up, I stopped. A shape waited at the top. Small, barefoot it was. Eloise. But she wasn't the same. She wore a nightgown soaked at the hem. Her eyes were wide, black all the way through, like her pupils had swallowed everything. She stared down at me, unmoving, lips stitched in a trembling line. "Eloise," I whispered. She slowly shook her head and lifted a hand to point behind. "Emmy," I turned. A man stood in the hallway. Not a staff member. Not from any yearbook I'd studied. His skin was sallow, stretched too tightly over his face, like a painting laid over bone. His clerical collar was stained, and something dark dripped from his cuffs. His eyes were not eyes at all. They were glass, opaque and milky, like the dolls in the attic. He opened his mouth, and his voice came out like cracked phonograph wax. "They cannot pass into heaven until the weight is paid." I backed up the stairs. He stepped forward, his footsteps making no sound. Eloise was gone now. Only the echo of her warning remained. I reached the top and fled into the east dormitory. Dozens of bunks lined the walls, untouched for years. Cobwebs hung like curtains, and the air was heavy with mildew and something worse, something like sulfur and flowers gone rotten. I slammed the door shut behind me. Inside, I saw them, children, dozens of them, not alive, not exactly dead, frozen in the bunks. Some curled in sleep, some sitting up with eyes wide open, staring into corners that had no light. Their mouths moved soundlessly. Some of them had writing carved into their skin, not words, numbers, dates, names. One girl near the far wall turned her head toward me, as if underwater. She spoke, barely audible. "You're not supposed to see this part yet." Then all the children turned their heads in unison, and from the center of the room, a shape unfolded. Not a person, a thing made from robes and rope and long, gnarled fingers. It reached upward and began to ring a bell that wasn't there, but I could hear it, loud and clear. And the children began to scream. I don't remember fleeing the dormitory, only the sound. The screaming didn't stop, even when I slammed the door behind me. Even when I staggered into a corridor that had no windows and no end. It followed me rattling inside my skull, like the clapper of that cursed bell. I pressed my palms to my ears. But it wasn't just sound anymore. It was thought, an old thought, worn thin by centuries of repetition, echoing from minds that no longer belonged to anyone. They must age to ascend. I stumbled forward, grasping blindly at the walls, desperate to escape. A stairwell opened beside me, spiraling downward into a lightless pit. I hesitated just for a breath, then descended. The air grew warmer, damper. The stone was slick with moss, or blood, or both. I reached the bottom and emerged into a narrow passage stone-lined and torch-lit. Impossible. It was a crypt, and waiting. At the end of it was Father Mallory, but not the man from the bell tower. Photographs thought this was the original. His hair long and yellow-white, his spine bent, and his mouth carved into a hollow, cruel smile. He stood beside a slab, and on the slab, under a sheet, lay a body. He did not speak. He only stepped aside and nodded with a shaking hand. I peeled back the cloth. It was a child, or had been. Her face was gray and collapsed, wrinkles etched into every inch of skin. Her hands were withered into claws. But I recognized her, Eloise. Her body cold, lifeless, but her eyes open. I stumbled back. Father Mallory spoke at last, his voice deep, guttural, and soaked in rot. She never escaped. None of them did. You're walking her memories, her punishment. My mouth moved. Why me? He laughed once, sharp and bitter. Because you opened the door. He pointed past the slab, behind him, at the far end of the crypt, was a door made of black iron. Ancient, covered in carved symbols, some of them familiar, alchemy, time, and blood. It creaked open, and I understood what I was seeing. It was not a hallway, it was a year, a corridor of time, stretching forward, and it was my future that waited there. A future where I would never leave Eldon Hill, where I would wander its halls, aging. For years, for lifetimes, trapped in the memory of a child who never escaped. I took one step forward, just one. The door behind me slammed shut with a sound like cracking bone. The torchlight dimmed. My heartbeat slowed not with calm, but with resignation. The corridor of time, if that's what it was not linear. It spiraled. It pulsed with years, not seconds. I saw them ripple ahead of me like layers of transparent skin. Desks rotting. Wallpaper curling. Children screaming. I was walking into memory itself. But whose? Behind me, Father Mallory was gone. The crypt had faded. My body remained, but my mind had been pulled into something older than the building, older than the town. I passed classrooms where children sat silently, faces slack, eyes glassy. Their hair was white, their skin paper-thin. One girl raised her hand, and it disintegrated to dust before reaching her shoulder. Ascend, and you are freed, the whisper returned. It wasn't one voice. It was many layered atop each other like sediment, all speaking the same phrase. They must age to ascend. Eloise appeared beside me not as the husk I'd seen in the crypt, but as the girl in the photo, alive, alert, and afraid. She didn't speak, just reached for my hand, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. This was never about punishment. It was about containment. Eldon Hill wasn't a school. It was a vessel, designed to trap time itself. The children weren't aged by trauma or cruelty. They were willing vessels, selected, possibly bred for their ability to hold temporal currents within themselves, living hourglasses. And when they failed, they were left behind in these endless corridors, trapped in temporal decay. The graduation ceremony was never about knowledge. It was a ritual of release. But only for the school, never the children. The institution remained young. They aged instead. I tried to speak, to scream, to move, but the air thickened, syrupy with memory. Then like a sudden cut in a film, I was back in the main hallway of the present-day school. I blinked. Sunlight was streaming in through the broken windows. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Somehow, it had returned with me. I looked. Down. 3. Missed calls from Ruth. A voicemail. Her voice trembling. Aaron, whatever you saw, whatever you found, don't send it. Don't upload anything. 2 men came to the house. They said they were with the historical board, but they weren't. They knew about Eldon Hill. They knew about you. Please, just walk away. I'm sorry I brought you into this. I sank to my knees, and I cried. Because I knew the truth. No one escapes Eldon Hill. Not the students, not the staff, not the researchers, not even those who come looking for answers. Epilogue. The video was never uploaded. The files I recorded from inside. The school, corrupted. Every frame beyond the gate reduced to static and garbled sound. But I left one thing behind. A tape recorder, looping. Broadcasting. The final minutes of my experience on a short-range frequency, just strong enough to be picked up if someone ever comes close. It plays a single phrase, over and over, through the static. They must age to ascend. No one has explained what that means. Not the state, not the church, not the shadowed institutions that funded Eldon Hill. But I leave you with this. SIF, a school reopens near your town. One that offers miraculous results, whose students never seem to return home, whose records are always sealed. Ask yourself, who's really aging, and who's being kept young? Sometimes, history isn't forgotten, it's fed, and it's always hungry.